This is the Discuss Metal podcast with Luke Easter. Hosted by Dan Terry, presented by discussmetal.com.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Discuss Metal podcast. I have a really fun conversation that we're about to have. I've got Luke Easter sitting here in front of me on my laptop screen. And, we can't, I couldn't fly out to see him because, traveling's not good right now. And, no, I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. And, Luke Easter, formerly of Tourniquet, and is now branching out on his own. And, well, not now, actually, he put a solo record out in 2018 and, he's been active since then. So, how you doing tonight, Luke?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the reason why I reached out to you to do an interview was, you had the solo record out for a couple years now, or a year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. We'll just say 2 years.
About a year and a half.
Make it easy, yeah. If we round up, but no, one of the reasons I wanted to get into it is I just. I don't get to do interviews with people that have had as long of a career as you have. And I just wanted to get some perspective on, changes in music, obviously, from the early 90s all the way up until now, how much stuff has actually changed. And also just to kind of get maybe not autobiographical, but just kind of get your perspective on a few things. So to start off, I guess the big question would be, what got you into music originally? And of course, I know everyone's into music, to some degree. But what was it for you that made music your passion, like the thing that would be more important to you than anything else?
That's a tough one. I mean, I've always enjoyed it. I've always loved singing. It's far back. I mean, I think the first time I sang in public, I was 4. I started kindergarten early, and I went to a small Christian school in the Bay Area, and the music teacher figured out that this 4-year-old kid could sing on pitch. And so if there was, chapel and there was going to be some sort of, solo or whatever in chapel, I got them a lot of the time. And I recall being told when I got a little bit older that there were people that would actually make it a point, like parents and whatnot, that would make a point to show up for chapel if they found out that I was singing when I was a little kid. So, I mean, that's like my earliest memories of music, but I've just always been borderline obsessed with music. I mean, when I was little, it was my Sesame Street records. And then from there it was, whatever, church music my parents had on vinyl at the time. And then on up to now, which is kind of all over the map, metal, pop, whatever. If it's got a hook and you can hum it, strum it on a guitar, then I'm in. I love it. It's like oxygen for me. I'm not super prolific. I don't want to make myself sound like I'm some sort of musical savant, but my wheels are constantly turning. I'm constantly dissecting other people's songs, and I'm listening to records, and just everything I do at some point leads back to music. That's awesome.
And so, like, I guess, yeah. I mean, with you having an experience at 4 years old, singing, I think that's cool. And it's always interesting to me to hear, somebody starts off early, they get into music, and there's kind of always this push, because there's a lot of people out there that are music fans, but what is the step, I guess? These are hard questions. I'm just throwing all my hard ones out at the beginning of the interview because, keep everybody awake. But what is it that would cause you to go from being somebody that enjoys something to actually wanting to create it? Or do you think that's a natural progression?
Again, it's another tough one. I think some of it is just that desire to see if you can do it. and do something that's as cool as what you've heard. I think some of it is a little bit arrogant. You know, you hear something, you go, well, I could do that, or oh, I could do better than that. And then at some point, you either back down or it's time to put up or shut up. You know, I'm not competitive. I don't understand sports. I don't understand, trying to jockey for a promotion at work or something. And it's similar with music. I mean, whenever we've played out and it's, some, whatever, whether it's a local show or a big, festival thing, it's never been an idea of, trying to one up whoever is playing before or after you, but it's definitely been a thing of let's leave as little as possible for whoever's coming up next. Let's just, do our best to obliterate everybody that's here. And I think that in kind of a holistic sense, it's the same way when I think just about music in general. I'm not competing with anybody. I'm not trying to be anybody. I'm not trying to steal anybody's audience or anything. But whatever I do, I want to make sure that people, hear it and go, whether they love it or not, go, wow, that was Luke Easter.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I really enjoy is that, because I listened to your solo record more recently. To be honest, I didn't even know that it was a thing until more recently. And whenever I listened to it, one of the things that struck me the most is you can always tell it's you singing, even though like that it's not stylistically it's night and day from Tourniquet, Whereas that in that band you were very aggressive, whereas, with your solo music, it's been more, for lack of a better word, fun, and like not as, I don't want to say mean spirited because I don't think that it's mean spirited just because you had sang metal before, but the difference in the aggression. But I think it's really cool how you have a very distinct voice that you have carved out, throughout your career. And was that always something natural, or like do you always feel like you had your own voice, or is that something you just had to develop?
I think it's a little bit of both. You tend to emulate the people that you listen to. I grew up, musically speaking, I grew up in the 80s, hair bands, the whole bit. I'm a huge Bon Jovi fan. And I imagine a lot of that comes through on the Pop Disaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a lot of it, the first band I ever sang in, I was in that band, if I'm remembering correctly, I was in that band almost a month before I sang a note.
Yeah.
Partly because I was scared and didn't think I could pull it off. I'd never sung in a band before. But I figured if I could get them to write with me, and show that I was a horrible songwriter at that point. I wouldn't say I'm a good songwriter now. I'm capable, but I was like abysmal when I was 19. But I figured if we at least were working together as a unit like that, and then I was, giving a voice to what we had come up with, that I would have a better shot at having a spot. And part of that was because I was scared that if we just kept doing covers, I was just going to mimic whatever singer I was covering at the time. Whereas if I wrote something over something that they came up with musically, just by virtue of the fact that it was something different, it was going to sound like me. And so that's kind of how I started carving out, sort of my own sound. So I think, if I'm being perfectly honest, when I was doing the metal stuff, there was some Bon Jovi. People that know me well would be like, oh, I heard that one song. There's that one little line did a Bon Jovi thing. Like, yeah, I kind of did. But I think there's a lot of Mustaine. I think there was a lot of Hetfield. And some of that's just because, when I did the Vanishing Lessons record, the Black Album was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. And so it was just perfectly natural to go, oh, that's how Metallica is doing it. I'll just kind of, find that kind of groove and go for it. But but it's like a never ending thing. You kind of have this idea of what you want to sound like, and then there's what you actually sound like. And you're constantly, I'm sure it's the same with guitar players and drummers. Everybody's constantly trying to refine what they do. And I think if you get complacent, think that, yes, this is my thing and this is exactly how I do it every night, then that's the beginning of the end, because you're not pushing yourself anymore, and it stops being interesting for you and for whoever's listening.
Yeah, totally. And, musicians that constantly push themselves can have a more diverse career, without you always just being, the same thing over and over and over and over again. There aren't a lot of musicians in bands that have gotten away with it. Somehow Slayer got away with it. Always just, doing the same thing constantly. But I guess they just got so good at what they do that, they people responded to it.
I heard Joe Elliott say one time that AC/DC really only has that one song, but it's a really good song, So yeah, back to your Slayer thing. It doesn't matter that Slayer kind of became this one thing, and Slayer only did this. They did it so well, and no matter how they did it or how many times they did it, it was still just so breathtaking at how well they did it that you didn't care that that this is the same blast beat from the last song. Well, it doesn't matter. It's still really cool. Let's go.
Right. Still Slayer. Yeah. And AC/DC, excellent example as well. Yeah. Because it's pretty much the exact same conversation. And so how many bands were you in before joining Tourniquet?
I played bass in a garage band with some friends I grew up with, and went right from that to singing in a one step up from a garage band in the South Bay. I did a handful of shows over 2 or 3 years, and went right from that to playing for Tourniquet. So I'd only sung in one other band.
Oh, wow. And I've always wondered your perspective on this, like what it's like to step into a band that's already established, has 3 records out and a fan base, and what type of pressure was that for? I mean, did you feel pressured that like you had something that you had to live up to? Or
once I found out that I didn't have to try and sing it exactly like the record, that I could, as long as the melodies were the same, and that I was singing the song as it was written, that I could kind of put my own stamp on it. Like I didn't have to do the high falsetto parts on the stuff from Stop the Bleeding.
Thank God.
Once we'd worked that out, and I knew that it was kind of a blank canvas, then it stopped being quite so daunting. And then the main thing was just remembering all the words. Because from audition to opening night was roughly 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness. So they needed you in and going, like hitting the ground running, so to speak.
They had a tour booked. They were all ready to go, and it was getting down to the wire. They didn't have a singer. From what I understand, it was down to me and one other guy, and they got my tape at the 11th hour, and they had pretty much almost settled on this other guy, and then they got my tape, and they called me up. I went down to LA, did the audition, drove home, and I'd only been home about an hour. I got a phone call. Hey, you're the guy. Can you be back down here? This weekend we need to rehearse, and then we start the tour. I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll quit my job and be down there.
Whenever you went, so you go in, you send them a demo tape, basically, of you. What was the tape? Was it just you singing songs, or specifically Tourniquet songs, or?
You know what? Actually, my audition tape had 0 Tourniquet songs. It was 2 originals by my old band. And then because I needed something to showcase that I could sing a little bit higher, a friend of mine and I did actually Chris, the guy that played most of the guitars on Pop Disaster and produced it, played on the demo that I sent to Tourniquet.
Okay.
But I did a cover of Lady from Striper, so that I could showcase that I had a little bit of top end that wasn't on the stuff that I had demoed out on the other songs.
So were you familiar with Tourniquet prior to? I mean, I would assume so, obviously, but you never know. People apply to one ads all the time and, don't actually know what they're getting into.
I knew who they were. 6 months before I joined the band, I had actually run into Gary at the NAMM show in Anaheim. And I had heard that Guy was out and asked Gary, so what does that mean? Are you going to be the singer now? He's like, oh, no, I'm not going to be the singer. We're going to find somebody else. I'm like, oh, okay. And literally like 6 weeks later, I was, I'd come to the end of my rope with my local band, and my attitude was, I'm either good enough to go to the next level, or I need to cut my hair and go to school. And so I was trying to figure out what to do. And Brian Gray from The Blamed, I've known him for a long, long time. He was in a local band at the time called Rocks and Pink Cement. And his band and my old band used to play together, occasionally. And I don't even remember why I was talking to him about it, but I told him that, I needed to make a move. And he's like, you should try out for Tourniquet. I'm like, nah, I do this like commercial, hard rock stuff. He's like, no, you could totally do it. I'm like, nah, I don't think so. He's like, here's Victor's number, call him up. So called him, got an address, sent a tape, and here we are now.
Right. Yeah. I watched recently I think it was either Cornerstone 93 or 94. And whenever I'm watching like a Tourniquet live video, I'm usually like anything early 90s, I'm expecting it to be Guy. And then I was so shocked. And I think this was 93, and that's why I was so shocked, because I think it was like right after Pathogenic had come out.
Right.
And I was super surprised to see you jump up and start singing, because I was like, oh, I didn't even know he was in the band that year, Yep. And so that was really interesting, seeing the old Tourniquet songs performed by you. Obviously the CDs were re-released later on, and they had live versions of a lot of those songs, and so it was always fun hearing those versions of the songs, because in essence they're the same song, but you always kind of added your own personal vibe to it, and so that was always a lot of fun for me. But that show looked crazy. I unfortunately didn't make it to Cornerstone until I was much older, because I'm not going to lie. I've been listening to Tourniquet since I was like a little kid, like I've still got Vanishing Lessons on cassette somewhere behind me. It was always fun to go back and watch those videos and just kind of get what the vibe was like back in the 90s, where, bands were like, it was actually an event, to go see a band. I feel like we take it for granted now because we can just pull it up on YouTube and watch it. Or
my first Cornerstone, the first Cornerstone I played was the first Cornerstone I attended. I'd never been. And when I got there, nobody had any idea who I was. I walked around all morning, I forget what time we got there. We got there quite a while before the show. We needed to set up merch and, just make sure that everything was dialed. But nobody had any idea who I was. And then we started the show, and that whole tour, the first run we did for Pathogenic tour, the four of them would go out and they would start playing, the title track. And, I didn't come out until I started singing the, when red is green and green is gray, part on the bridge for Pathogenic. So really up until, probably 10 minutes into the show, by the time the intro tape, played and the band, vamped and then started playing, nobody had any idea who I was. It's very different than today, where, like you said, you just pull it up on YouTube and go, oh, it's that guy. Oh, this is going to suck. But
I didn't say that. But
some people would.
Well, what's interesting is that, like, you go, you joined the band right after Pathogenic came out, and you're basically like you were saying, you played commercial hard rock, before that.
Yeah. And
you've got Pathogenic probably being one of the heaviest Tourniquet albums to date when it came out, was, so vastly different than what you were like. Did you ever think like, oh man, what have I gotten myself into? Or is this going to be too hard? Or, am I going to be able to keep up with it? Or was it just kind of like, I'll just sing guys' parts and do my own thing when we write a new record?
Once I wrapped my head around how I was going to do it at the audition, trying to remember what the audition songs were. I think we did Dog's Breakfast, Phantom Limb, Test for Leprosy. I want to say Arc of Suffering. I think those were the four. So once I kind of got comfortable with those four and figured out how I was going to do those in the audition, then I kind of had an idea how to approach the rest of it. Because once they told me I was in, like I said, I had about a week or so to learn all the songs. And so I basically was just like, okay, they liked that voice for that song. I'm just going to try and plug that into everywhere that's in that kind of register. And I mean, obviously I have a very different voice than Guy does. Somebody, told me recently that they would describe the difference as being like, the difference between Joey Belladonna and John Bush, when John took over in Anthrax.
Yeah, totally.
They're both capable singers, but, Joey's got more of a, classic metal, power metal, kind of thing. And John is a more, guttural, throaty, kind of thing. I can't sing. I mean, I can in certain registers. If I push, I can sing really high and clean, similar to what Guy would do. I don't have quite the range in terms of falsetto as Guy does. He can hit some stuff in his falsetto that would kill me if I tried.
Sure.
But I can do all of the really throaty, more guttural things. And in my opinion, it's got a little bit more oomph to it because it's a more natural feeling sound for me. Whereas it does seem like he's doing a character. And that's not a put down, at all. It's just, we have different voices. So yeah, once it was made clear that they wanted me to put my spin on them, be true to the song, but they didn't want me to be Guy. They wanted me to be me. It made it easier to kind of reinterpret them. And, I did. I tried to be true to what Guy had done because I was a fan before I was ever in the band. I owned the first 3 records. And again, I'll bring up Chris. Chris turned me on to Tourniquet in the first place. He found them. And so I vividly remember sitting in Chris's bedroom, listening to Stop the Bleeding on a cassette and just tripping out, who is this band? These guys are awesome. So to go from 91 to 93 and suddenly I'm playing with those guys was, it was kind of mind blowing.
Was being in a Christian metal band, what you expected it to be, or was it, did it kind of subvert your expectations at all of like what that was going to be like on the road playing to, different types of crowds? Because I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of like Christian events, but there's no Christian metal band in the world that just wants to play Christian events,
No. You know what? I had no preconceptions. I was just happy to play. So to me, playing a church was the same as playing a bar or, playing a festival. As long as there were people there, especially early on, it was a lot harder to, turn it on and kind of fake it. If there weren't enough people, I fed more off of the energy. I still do. I mean, if there's a bigger crowd, it makes the job easier. You don't have to work as hard to connect. But that was my main thing is as long as there's people here, I can do this. I don't care, where it is. And to be honest, I mean, in earlier shows like that, the churches by and large, were better run. You knew you were going to have better catering and, you might have access to a shower. Whereas if you're playing a club, they probably ignored your rider. There might be a pizza, there might be some coffee, but otherwise, you're kind of on your own until you get to, wherever your next stop is where you can actually find a shower and a good meal, hopefully sleep.
Right. Yeah. That's the key is at least whoever's driving gets some sleep. Right.
That was brutal. That was, I mean, I'm glad that I started out old school. I did my first record on 2-inch tape. I did my first tour in a van. So whatever dues I didn't pay playing clubs for years and years, working my way up. I think I made up for them in endless drives for my first couple of tours.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird, too, thinking of, like, having to look at maps, to figure out where you're going to go and having to call on payphones and stuff.
How did we function?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have any idea how to read a map anymore.
Yeah, no way. Like if it's not turn by turn directions, I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going there.
Yeah.
Like it's just, and but yeah. So going back to that first record you did with the band Vanishing Lessons, what I thought was really interesting is how they went from being predominantly a thrash type of band, sometimes even heavier than that in places. I always just think about those blasts and Pathogenic. And I'm like, this is just like really extreme for Tourniquet,
Yeah.
But when you went into Vanishing Lessons, we jokingly, me and my friends would always refer to that as Tourniquet's Black Album,
Yeah.
in the sense that you guys were going for, it's still metal because you can't listen to a song like the song Vanishing Lessons and think it's anything but it definitely had that stronger hard rock bass, a lot of blues, influence in there. And, what was that like for you creatively? I guess I don't really know how much creative input you had on the writing of the music, but that seemed to me to kind of be your way to finally shine instead of having to go out and sing a record that you didn't record.
Yeah, I didn't have any involvement in the writing for a bunch of different reasons. Some of it was just because, I was new, I was an unknown quantity. But some of it was just because the way that things were with our deal at the time, it didn't make sense.
Sure.
So I didn't write. We did a ton of pre-production for it, which I later found out was partly because our producer was scared that I because I'd never done any recording. I'd never, that was not an experience that I'd had yet. So he was concerned about whether or not I was going to be able to deliver in the studio. And the record company was a little bit concerned also because, okay, he went out and sang, for the tour for the last record. Can he actually, pull it off here? Or at least that's some of what was, expressed to me at the time. So we did a ton of pre-production. We actually did a 2-song demo with our producer, Jim Faraci. We did a demo of Vanishing Lessons, and we did a demo of, I forget what the other one was, but that put the record company at ease, and they pressed copies to give to the sales crew so that they could go out and pre-sell the record and say, look, Tourniquet is still alive. They have a singer, and look, they're good. In terms of the shift stylistically, some of it, like you mentioned, the Black Album, I think a lot of it was because that record was so game changing for our genre. I think everybody kind of made that left turn. It was like, oh, let's try and balance out being really commercial but still trying to be heavy. But I think some of it is because I was a little bit more versatile, and I'm treading lightly. I don't want to diminish any of what Guy did, and I don't want to sound like I'm breaking my arm and saying that I'm,
you're two different dudes.
Yep,
it's fun.
Very different. Yeah. And there were things that they would throw at me that I would just say, yeah, okay, and I'd roll with it and deliver. That Guy as a singer either wouldn't have been comfortable with or just wouldn't have been able to do it. So they had done all of these interesting, cool things with Guy, and now they had a completely different palette that they could work with. And it was like, well, let's try this. Well, let's try that. Let's do this other thing. So I think Vanishing Lessons is kind of the culmination of that. We had really gone as far as we could go at the time in terms of being, really, really heavy. Because like you pointed out, Vanishing Lessons is pretty, or Pathogenic was really extreme. And so we didn't quite, bounce back to the opposite extreme, but we kind of found a middle lane where we could still be heavy and still be, metal/hard rock, but also, be a little bit more commercial, maybe have a little bit more appeal outside of the metal fans. And I think it worked for us. I mean, we got really good airplay at rock radio and at metal radio, specifically on the Christian side. But we also started getting some notice, from the mainstream press. a lot of that groundwork had been laid, with Pathogenic and with us being on Metal Blade or having a distribution agreement with Metal Blade. But then when we dropped Vanishing Lessons, people kind of took notice, because the easy play would have been to just make, Pathogenic 2,
Right.
instead we're like, well, let's do this stylistic shift and show them a whole other side. So it was kind of a gamble, but I think it paid off. I had fun. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely worked, because I think the combination of playing a more accessible, more hard rock based sound, plus your voice really did future proof the band in a way. Because with Guy, he's singing falsettos, and like that's really cool. When Stop the Bleeding comes out, because they weren't the only band doing that. If you're all the way in 1994 and your new record has high pitched falsetto vocals, which, I mean, granted, Guy did kind of calm down on that too as the band went, but with your voice, it definitely gave more of that 90s hard rock vibe that everybody was looking for, like that edgy vibe, because you were able to, because if you go heavier than Pathogenic, then you're just screaming the whole time.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense to sing, but if you're playing songs that you can actually, like you said earlier in the interview, if it can be sung and hummed and strummed on a guitar, that's what is going to appeal to the mass amount of people, and the metal fans still get their riffs, they still get their solos, and all of that. But I think I almost think you're underselling it in how much of a future proofing your addition to the band actually was. In that, when I was a kid, I listened to Pathogenic and I listened to Psychosurgery and all that, and I thought that was cool, but it sounded old to me, as a kid, because it's just like, oh, it's old, it's kind of thin, it's like really fast guitars and stuff. As a kid, I'm looking for something that's going to remind me of Enter Sandman or right. Something like that. So in that sense, that record really was influential to me as far as being a metal fan. The following record, Crawl to China, was even more so in the sense of I don't really have any way. I hope you don't find this offensive, but I always refer to that record as the Wackadoo record, because it's got that, because it has the same combination of hard rock songs and metal songs, just like Vanishing Lessons had. Some of the songs are even a little bit hookier, but how just incredibly insane some of the lyrical concepts are, how just crazy it invokes the old Tourniquet, in the sense that you just never had any idea like what a song was going to be about. One song's about imaginary friends, one song's about bats, one song's about I played that for my wife earlier tonight when I was cooking dinner, and she got a pretty big kick out of it. Bats, yeah. The kids loved it.
We'd pull that out and do that when we'd play acoustic shows, and people would actually sing along. It was always fun.
Yeah.
Crawl, for whatever reason, kind of gets a bad rap with some people, and I don't think it's fair. I know that I've heard over the years from people who think that was we were signed to a quote unquote Nashville label at the time,
right?
And so a lot of people think, oh, that was your CCM record, and they made you do that. Nobody made us do anything. That was one of the very cool things about being part of that band. Nobody ever made us do anything. I get why people would think that, because we in the interim between Vanishing and Crawl, we did Carry the Wounded, which was even more commercial than Vanishing Lessons. I mean, we even had a piano ballad on there.
Yeah,
and we followed that up with Collected Works, and Collected Works had what at the time were probably the two heaviest songs we'd ever done, Perfect Night for Hanging and Hand Trembler. And we had given every indication that that's the direction we were going to take on the next record. So people were super stoked. And then Crawl comes out, and it's decidedly not those two songs.
Right.
I still think there's a lot of heavy moments on that record. I mean, Enveloped in Python is pretty heavy. But it's one of those things, you know, we'd signed with a smaller label after we left Frontline, and then the Dove Awards happened, and that was the year that like Jesus Freaks and DC Talk and Jars of Clay, all those guys swept, and so suddenly Nashville's freaking out because they're like, wait a minute, this edgier, you know, weirder music, it's not just Amy and Michael W. Smith anymore. We need to figure this out. So everybody wanted a rock band. And so Diadem, which was part of EMI, bought our contract from this indie label that we had signed with out of LA. And, you know, they were more old school. That was the first time we had a stylist on a photo shoot. That was the first time they, like, you know, we didn't just have some friend shoot us. They actually flew a photographer, you know, and the stylist dude out from Nashville to take pictures. You know, so it was all these new things. But the thing that we'd never encountered before is one of the higher ups at the label wanted demos so that he knew what the record was going to sound like. They hadn't done demos since they, you know, recorded stuff for Stop the Bleeding. Everything was always, we wrote songs and we made a record and then we put the record out.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, the two tracks that we did for, you know, Vanishing Lessons, you know, were an anomaly. It was a test to see if I could pull it off, but it was also a way of giving the sales team a way to go out and sell that record. So they told us they wanted demos, and it ended up with Ted and Aaron and me in Ted's apartment with a 4-track with unfinished songs and the two of them on acoustic guitars and, you know, kind of faking it. You know, the songs weren't even full lyrics. I mean, I don't think anything that we sent ended up actually being on the record. They were just ideas, and we sent 2 or 3 of those. And I think it kind of got the point across that, you know, you signed us, let us be us. So by the time we got into the studio, we just had this, you know, completely different thing going on. And it became Crawl to China. I mean, every song on that record has a different guitar sound. In some ways, I'm more proud of that record than any of the other records, just because it's just so it's so diverse for us, you know, especially at that time. It's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those records that, you know, it's one of those records that I really wish I could go back in time and re-experience the first time that I listened to it, because I had no idea what I was going to hear next. You know, you get through a song, it's got its own vibe, it's got its own kind of identity, and then you move on to a next song and you're on a totally different planet. You know, and that's really different. And, you know, and granted, I was younger, so when I heard it, you know, there's some songs that I was like, this is awesome. And then some songs made me mad because they were too soft, and, you know, stuff like that. Cause that's just how kids think. And some adults.
There's a ton of people that hate Bats, and I get it, but I make no apologies for that song. It was fun.
Yeah, I'm happy that it exists because, you know, like I said, I played it while I was making dinner, and my wife got a kick out of it, and my kids thought it was funny, you know, so like it made them happy, you know,
yeah.
And that's, you know, I can't really complain about that, not as an adult. And actually Bats is actually one of my favorite songs on the record, just because, again, it's just so out of nowhere, and it's funny, but not like funny like, oh, it's funny because it's so bad. It's just like the content is hilarious, and you know,
interesting metaphor.
Yeah, definitely.
That was a transitional record too, in more ways than just the obvious that, you know, stylistically it was kind of all over the place. That was kind of a bridge in a lot of ways from the Tourniquet that was, when it was still, you know, Gary and Victor and Ted, and then, you know, Aaron and me, into what I'll call, I guess, the unholy trinity of Ted and Aaron and me.
Right.
Which was kind of, you know, the next couple records was just the three of us. And so I think that in some ways that record was like a palate cleanser because it kind of cleared the decks of whatever ideas were still floating in the ether from what was, and took a very, decided shift into what it became, which was, things got heavier, but it became more and more, and again, I'm treading lightly because I don't want to sound negative about it, but it became more and more TED driven as opposed to band driven. I mean, that one for sure did have a lot more of Ted on it than it did of Aaron and me, but there was still a lot of, it was more of a band record in terms of Aaron and I wrote 3 songs, Ted wrote the rest, and then we kind of fleshed it all out together, as opposed to, as we went down the line, a lot of stuff would already be thought out, fleshed out, and arranged, and we would show up and play.
And it's really interesting too, speaking of that record, the song "The Telltale Heart," that is probably one of the heavier songs, and it's just I still can never get over that. Whenever it just goes into that, like the dun 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 dun, like it sounded so heavy and so modern in like such stark contrast to everything else. I remember just being like, holy crap, like that one blew me away. I love the way that song starts.
That one was Aaron and I both, but especially Aaron. He got me into them. But the first Korn record had come out right before we recorded that record, so that song, especially that riff, probably owes a lot to Korn.
Yeah, I can hear that. And it's funny you say that. I wouldn't have made that connection beforehand, but now I can't unhear it now that I'm thinking about it.
Aaron took me to a Korn show somewhere down in LA. It was right before Life is Peachy came out the week after. And that was legitly the first time I was ever scared for my own safety at a show. The pit started at the stage. And I mean, this is, early Korn. This is when they're still kind of underground.
Right.
The pit it was like in this big, it wasn't quite arena size, but it wasn't a theater. It probably held like 2,000 or 3,000 people, maybe 2,000 people. But the pit started at the stage and went like 3/4 of the way back to the front of house. And we're like standing there holding onto the barricade next to the mixing desk.
That's crazy.
And hoping, well, I won't speak for Aaron, but I was hoping that we were not going to die.
You got to find that safe spot,
It was awesome.
I cut my teeth on bands like, as I got older, I started listening to stuff like Zao and, Living Sacrifice and bands like that. And so those pits I had a very similar experience. Going to my first hardcore show where I was like, where's the place where people stand where they don't die? Like where's the safe zone? And I guess it's
backstage.
Backstage, or that's why I became a podcaster, so I can just go backstage instead of having to get killed in the pits. But yeah, it's that's really interesting. I would have never really thought of Korn influence, because as a horrible music fan, I put Korn in one box, I put Tourniquet in another box, I put and it's always fun to kind of see those influences in places that you really wouldn't expect. And so you guys, I mean, the next record, obviously, even heavier, like, and everybody calls it like a back to basics kind of record, even though if you really listen to it, it doesn't really sound like the old Tourniquet records. And I think that was a good thing.
Yeah, we consciously, when we went into Microscopic, we talking amongst ourselves, we all kind of decided I want to make a really heavy record. We should make again, not like a Pathogenic Part 2, but we should go back in more of that kind of aggressive direction. Partly just because we felt like it was time. We'd done, a string of, quote unquote mellower records. But also just artistically, it felt right. Like, okay, we've kind of mined that vein. Let's go back to, what we made our name with. But you're right. It's still, especially in light of what, the records that came directly before it, it was, extremely heavy. But that's probably when more of the proggy type stuff started really coming to the fore, the flute and the bouzouki and stuff like that. And, just some of the weirdness in with all the heaviness, more so than on previous records.
Was that challenging for you? I know, like, vocally, there's a lot of weird stuff going on Microscopic. Just, and I know it's a combination of you, and Aaron, but was that like more challenging to kind of have to go less of the sing-songy into more of the aggressive vocal, or was that just like you're ready for it?
It's kind of both. I mean, when you're doing the record, you're not singing it straight through like you would in a performance,
right?
So we'd kind of block it out. Let's do this song. Do we have any other songs that have really heavy, raspy, gruff parts that I have to do? Let's knock all those out first. Okay, do we have clean vocals? Okay, let's pull those up. Let's do all those parts. Let's throw harmonies. So you're not burning yourself out. But there were parts that were more challenging, like the acapella part at the end of Besprinkled. That was, I retracked that part like 3 or 4 times in completely different sessions. I would think that I was done, and then we'd go back the next day, and Ted and Bill would be like, there's this little thing that we don't, and then can we do it again? And because it's such a quiet, breathy vocal, and because there's almost nothing else going on, it has to be as perfect as you can get it. This is pre-auto tune. This is that one we recorded on ADAT, so there was like no way. It had the performance had to be as perfect as possible. So in that regard, it was really demanding, really challenging.
And I would imagine that it would have been demanding too, translating into a live setting. Like, I don't know how, like, because I mean, I've sang in bands before, but like all of my songs have ever only been like 2 to 3 minutes long, So like getting through a song like Gilgamesh live, I mean, my God, like how do you pace yourself, to get, and as the records go on, the songs get even longer.
It's weird. There's some cues that I would take off of the drums. I would just remember that, there's this weird little fill, and then I start singing. And there's other parts where I'd have to like watch Aaron really closely to figure out what part we were at, so I'd know when to jump in correctly. And actually, it was either Tomb of Gilgamesh or Skeezix 2, and we did it. We're playing it in Jacksonville, Florida, and I lost my place. Started. And to their, I mean, if everybody's doing their job, then everybody's paying attention. And if something bad like that happens, hopefully everybody will correct and go along with it. But we would refer to that for a long time as the Great Jacksonville Train Wreck.
No.
I don't know if the audience realized that I had come in, like a minute and a half before I should have. But by the time I got through the section and looked over and saw how horrified Aaron looked and realized that the drum sounded a little bit weird for a few measures, I was like, oh crap, I screwed up, So there were nights when it was easier. There was nights when it was harder, and you just kind of, you figure out how to find your cues. And so, sometimes it was off the bass or off the drums. Sometimes it was off the guitars. Sometimes it was just, I hope I'm in the right place because I lost count like a minute ago.
Yeah. And that's hard because, I mean, having to wait a minute and a half, that's like 1,000 years when you're standing up on stage and you're trying to look interesting, in the middle of all these long instrumental passages, like my hat's off to you for being able to endure something like that, because it's, it's all for the love of the performance and everything. But I've always thought that during longer segments of songs where I didn't have anything to do, like what, should I stand? Should I go get like a bottle of water? Or what am I supposed to do here?
I would hydrate. I think that's when I really got into my shadow boxing phase. I would try and figure out, I would try and anticipate which cymbal was going to be hit, and then, basically like throw a punch so that, I was like punching as that cymbal was being hit. And it kind of turned into, it wasn't for long, but it kind of turned into a game, with Ted and me, where, I'd, make faces and try and anticipate, and he would try and fake me out, not hit the symbol I thought he was going to hit.
Right.
So, but yeah, you figure out whatever you can do to not look ridiculous until it's time to sing again. And then hopefully not look ridiculous once you start singing.
Well, and after that record came out, it was a pretty long time, I want to say, between that and Moth and Rust.
That Microscopic came out in 99 and Moth was 2002, which for us was a huge gap at that point. Little did we know.
Yeah. And that record came out. I remember that one got that was during a time where I was transitioning out of like traditional metal and into more of the like hardcore stuff, because that's just what everybody was doing that year, and I know I remember ordering Moth and Rust. I don't remember if I ordered it from the website or not. It's so weird now talking about it in 2020, because now, I mean, midnight a record's out, I can listen to it immediately, but I remember waiting for that record, and and all the stuff that we talked about on Microscopic View, I mean, even more so, longer songs, more prog elements, a hilarious song about a giant squid that hadn't been discovered yet. Then like a year later, it was discovered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it had been discovered. People knew it existed. I mean, hence the song and the name. But
right.
But yeah, nobody'd seen one in, like 50 years, 100 years.
Right.
Yeah, we were quite happy once somebody actually found an Architeuthis in the wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. I don't remember what show I was watching. I think it was the guy that does River Monsters. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but it's a guy named Jeremy Wade. He normally would track down like weird fish in rivers and streams like all over the world. It's a way more interesting show than I'm selling it to be, but he did a really interesting episode where he was doing like deep sea stuff, and he literally just like went down and found a giant squid. I was like, are you serious? Like, and it's funny, it wasn't until that moment that I was like, oh, do people have seen it? And my wife, she was like, yeah. I mean, it's pretty like common knowledge now. And I was like, yeah, but there's this Tourniquet song. It just shows, I get my science from the music I listen to, instead of picking out a book or, keeping track of current events. But, that record was, interesting in that, because I feel like Microscopic I consider those records to be, and even with Antiseptic, I consider them to be kind of like a trilogy. Me and my buddies call it the Prague trilogy, and
I can see that.
And because they all followed a common theme. I noticed that there seemed to be more repeated themes throughout the records as they went. That just, I don't know, that whole like, I don't even know how to, I can't hum it, but just this, I don't know, if you listen to those.
Kind of like movements in a symphonic piece.
Yes. They were they became all over the place. So
you'd hear an overture from something, and then it would pop up as an aside in another piece later in the record.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
My co-host Joe would be able to more accurately articulate that, but he's the classically trained musician, and I'm just the meathead that listens to heavy stuff. So
I'm with you. Ted is the big classical guy, and I was just the meathead that's like, hey, I like Bon Jovi.
Right. You guys here to rock tonight? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I had a brain fart one night and actually said, "Are you guys ready to rock?" And I wanted to die. I wanted to die. It's such a cliche, and it's so not what we were about. And I said it, and the minute I said it, I'm like, "Oh, that was bad." And I look over my shoulder, and his jaw was sitting on his snare drum. He was like, "What did you just do?"
We're a serious metal band here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Paul Stanley. What?
Yeah. You know what though? Even though you said that though, I bet there were still tons of people that were like, "Yeah!" People
were like, "Oh!" But I was still mortified because, Probably now I wouldn't care, but at the time I was like, no, we don't do those things. We're not a cliched, whatever. We're serious musicians.
Right. We're a smoke machine laser light show band now. Yeah. Yeah. And so, with Moth and Rust, that record came out, and then honestly, I kind of just thought Tourniquet was gone after that.
So did I. There was a couple times, that came out in 2002. We didn't put out anything else again until 2012.
Yeah.
And there was a couple times in that 8 to 10 year gap between doing records where it crossed my mind that should I just quit? And then it was like, well, what am I really quitting?
Quit what? Working. Yeah, quit what? Yeah.
So I guess I'll just carry on and see what happens. And it's not like we weren't trying. I mean, the industry changed a lot. The deal we were in, the terms kind of got changed on us, which was unexpected, but especially at that time isn't, totally unusual. And so then we were like, okay, well, we'll show you, we'll go find another deal. And then, things had changed. So no, we couldn't just walk into another deal. People wanted us to, be, well, what are your attendance numbers? What are your merch numbers? Like, well, we haven't actually done a tour in, forever. Like, well, we're not going to sign you if you're not touring. That's right. Too big a gamble for us. So which led up to, we finally, Kickstarter happened, and we used that, and that's how we did Antiseptic. But I mean, if that hadn't happened, if Kickstarter and crowdsourcing, the funding for a record hadn't happened, you'd probably still be sitting here wondering, I wonder whatever happened to those guys.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the boat that I was in, and that's a crucial 10 years.
Yeah.
As far as industry shifting, because you're coming back into a world where the traditional record label doesn't even make sense.
No.
When you're like, well, we've got these fans, because I think back then, I want to say between like 2006 and roughly 2012, that was when Facebook was still in its infancy. MySpace was around for a period during that time, and you guys knew you had the fans because you had you had the forums, you had the all these places that are like, no, it's an active band, and if they put anything out, we'll get it.
Yeah,
and so to do a Kickstarter, would have been the only thing that made sense in 2012. Like I remember helping Kickstarter because I was like, oh my God, they're back. It's going to be awesome. And like, kind of jumping back into it. Which is it's so funny to think about that.
It made me that much more thankful. I've never taken it for granted, that I got to do what I did, with that band, all, the travel and making records and all the people I've met and all of that. It still doesn't seem real sometimes. But it felt so good that people rallied and helped us put out that record. Because they had no reason to. We hadn't done anything, in so long. But it also was very humbling, because by that point it was kind of a who, with younger people, and whether they were industry people or just people listening to music. There's a huge chunk of kids that had zero idea who we are. And we were no longer the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We were just, some other band trying to, release a record and hoping that people would dig it. And honestly, if I'm completely honest, that's been the reality, in my opinion, for that band, probably since not Microscope, probably since Moth, since Moth came out. We had our heyday in the mid 90s. We rode it out into the late 90s, and then it's been what it's been. It's been part nostalgia act and part hopefully we're the comeback kids. And Yeah, maybe I'm being too hard, but I mean that's just kind of how it seemed.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense to do that though, to be the throwback, but also have some new material for the fan base to listen to.
Yeah.
But they also want to hear all the hits, so to speak, whenever
Right.
whenever they would see you guys play live. So I mean, it's not that different than what a band like Iron Maiden still is doing. What Metallica's been doing for the past 20 years. You still get that new material, so they're able to have that creative outlet because nobody likes playing the same songs forever.
Right.
But yeah, to have that kind of throwback. Was probably good, to have the nostalgia. Because I remember I used to be on this message board called Firestream. I don't even know if it's still around.
I heard recently somebody's trying to keep it alive, but I think they just need to shut the door.
Because I mean, I think
what was your handle on Firestream?
Oh, it's embarrassing, but it was Cries from My Past, which was based on
You were Cries from My Past.
I was, yes.
I remember that screen. I was the message board dude in that band. I mean, Ted and Aaron would pop up from time to time, but I was the one who was most active, and I kind of, headed up that whole side of things and tried to make sure everybody was behaving and that nobody was saying anything about us that was untrue or unwarranted.
Yeah, I remember a lot of that because I mean, I think there was even a whole Tourniquet section, if I remember correctly.
That was a mess.
Yeah.
I don't want to call anybody a liar, but the guy that started Firestream was pretty fast and loose with the truth.
Yeah. I mean, it's a message board. Gossip is part of the deal,
Yeah.
And
so we had lost our hosting, and he agreed to, he offered to take us on and let us have our space. And then not long after we got there, he started telling us, "No, you can't do that. This is mine." We're like, well, wait a minute. This is our part of it. Nope. What? And then he waited for us to go to Europe and then locked us out.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Yeah, I don't remember that guy's name. I actually still have a Firestream sticker on my Nintendo Wii.
That's awesome.
It's behind me somewhere that I haven't played in a long time. But
I would say his name, but I don't want to give him any more attention than I already have.
Yeah, I was just being nice. I don't remember his name, but yeah, it's it doesn't matter now in 2020. But I
don't wish ill, but I'm glad that he's not part of my life anymore.
There you go. And the message boards were always funny because I think even my band had a section there, and then I went off and started my own message board and took a bunch of people with me, and there was some drama there. But I remember that website being the place you would go, and I'll never forget the very first time I saw a post from Luke Easter, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that, if I wanted to, I could send a message to Luke Easter. You know what I mean? It was because there's perception and reality, right? Because I was basically probably maybe 16, 17 doing that. Wow. I know I had, I was running a Christian metal magazine. It was really crappy, but I'm not advertising it, but it was this magazine that I was doing. It was right after I got out of high school. So I must have been 17, 18 maybe whenever we did that. But the perception of reality was I'd see you, and I think sometimes Jason Sherlock would post on there.
Sherlock.
And I did an interview with him, I guess about 7-8 months ago. And that was awesome. He's a beautiful human being. But I remember being oh my God, I could send Luke Easter a message and be oh, he probably won't even respond to it or see it because, those guys are huge and, they've got this, and it's so funny to think about that now, especially doing the podcast because every now and again, I'll get messages from people that are oh my God, I can't believe you responded back, and, I remember that just being so huge that you could talk to band members on, message boards. And it's funny now hearing you say you were basically there doing damage control.
I was there because I enjoyed it. I liked the interaction. But yeah, some of it was because, there's a lot of drama attached to that band.
When you have that many ex-members, I mean, it's bound to happen.
When you've got that kind of personality dynamic at play, it's going to generate drama. And so it wasn't so much damage control so much as it was I like the interaction, but this interaction also affords me the opportunity to mitigate things if and when needed.
And I think what was the most fun about that community is it really mirrors kind of like what Facebook is now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately though, on Facebook, if I say something crazy, like my actual name is is attached to it, so if I say something crazy, I have to be able to explain it or defend it or whatever. But it's interesting because my wife all the time is always she'll scroll through Facebook and she'll be all like, oh, I can't believe these people are doing this, or they're making this dumb argument, or they're saying this or this. And I was like, it's been this way. Like, this is nothing new. Like I was on message boards in the early 2000s. It was exactly this,
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the band. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah. So so that record came out, and then that was the last record you were on. Well, you were on the one song on Onward to Freedom, which was basically just a cover. Record. Yeah, it was Ted's solo record.
Yeah.
And it was a cover song. Although I actually do enjoy hearing, because when I'm listening to something like that, and this is just my opinion, when I'm listening to something like that, whenever I finally got to that song, I was like, oh man, finally it sounds like Tourniquet, and it was a song that I knew already, but we never really had a studio version of you singing that song, so that was a lot of fun. I was like, when I was cooking earlier and I was playing, I've got this like Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen, and I like leaned out and gave my wife this weird look and was like, more feline fuel for the incinerator. Like, it's really dumb, but anyway, so you're that was your last appearance in a Tourniquet related project, and
yes.
then so we didn't hear anything from you for a couple of years, but now you've got in 2018 the Pop Disaster record that I'm assuming, did you put that out yourself or?
Yes, that was self-released.
Okay. And the thing that I found striking about it the most was that I was like, oh my God, first of all, this is not as intensely hardcore, like in the sense that I really enjoyed hearing your melodic voice come out more on this. Because I'm just so used to hearing the gruff, I'm in a metal band, and so it was fun hearing you sing in in that context. And I'm assuming that there had to have been a great deal of freedom for you as far as being able to be the creative force, behind the whole thing.
I mean, it's nerve-wracking because the part of being in a band is it's all of you. So, if people love it, you all did it together. If you have a healthy perspective of things. And if people hate it, well, you did it together and you'll get through it together. Whereas with this, it was like, hey, I have these ideas and I hope they don't suck.
Right.
And honestly, that's part of where the title came from. I know that the easy play would have been to try and do a metal record. But even if I'd done that, it would have probably just been those same songs or similar songs, but arranged so that they sounded metal.
Sure.
Because what's on that record is how my brain works melodically. But I'm also, I wanted to make an honest record, but I'm also, realistic enough to know that there was a very good chance that a lot of the Tourniquet fans that I hoped were going to follow me into this new, phase, I knew there was a good chance that they'd hate it, because it's so pop.
Sure. Yeah.
So I figured, I'll just give it a tongue-in-cheek title, and then they can say whatever they want. But it, kind of takes the sting off it because, it doesn't matter what we say. Look what he called it.
Right. Yeah,
so,
you're like, I know. Yeah.
There was a lot of freedom, but at the same time, there was a lot of Chris, my producer / musical partner in crime, talking me off the ledge because I was overthinking things too much. But all in all, I'm happy with that record. It's the record I wanted to make. It's a record I'd wanted to make for a long time, and it was just fun. It was cool to, these songs that had, either just lived in my head or that I had really rough demos of, hear them, fully realized. Really cool. I've got David Bach from Guardian. I've got Tim Gaines from Stryper, Jesse Sprinkle, Josiah Prince. I've got all these really cool, really talented people that probably have 100 other things that they could better spend their time on than playing on my record. And they were all down. They were all in it, and they made it sound better than I ever could have hoped.
Well, and it was refreshing for me, as I've talked earlier in the interview about, like, oh, I'm just a meathead, I just like heavy stuff, and I was mad at this song on Crawl to China because it wasn't heavy or whatever. But like looking at what I do now, where I'm pretty much 24/7 listening to metal bands to talk about on the show every single week, I'm just really, after 3 years, I'm very burned out on a lot of that stuff. And so whenever I put it in, like it didn't, put it in. What I really mean is I pulled it up on my phone and streamed it off of, off my streaming service. Whenever I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, like, this is fun. It's honest. I think that was the thing that really stuck out to me, is that it's fun, it's honest, and it's a real representation of you. And what I like about it is that it's, I think with, and I'm trying to say this again so that it doesn't sound negative, but I think, coming from a band that was loved by fans like they were, you were, certainly the voice of the band, whether you see it that way or not. You were the voice, but maybe you weren't the main creative drive in the band. So it was refreshing to listen to something that this is all you. We're getting an actual, a picture of what's going on in your mind and, your thoughts musically. And that's what I found really refreshing about it, was that it was a palate cleanser for me, number one. And, two, I can listen to it in the car with my wife and kids, and, they don't hate it. So that's a big plus, as much as they love listening to Sepultura or whatever I decide to put on, when we're driving. And so, yeah, and I think I think it's fun. And I guess, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what, are you doing a follow-up? Are you doing anything, with it? Do you have a new batch of songs that we haven't heard yet, or?
I have about probably 2/3 of an album in various stages of development in my head.
Okay.
So yeah, I am writing a follow-up. I was actually, texting with Chris earlier today, and we're most likely, the plan at this point is to do a single, just to kind of, show proof of life and get something new out there, and use that as the springboard into another full length, hopefully by the end of the year. But I mean, I've been, busy since then. I mean, I put out the Pop Disaster, and then right on the heels of that, I decided I'm not a Christmas guy. Christmas is not a happy time in my life. It's just always been kind of a downer. But it's like the perfect time to kind of throw out something that's, a little bit different. And so we did Last Christmas, that from Wham. Did it for a couple different reasons. Did it partly just because I like that song, and somebody I brought up, it was out with Chris and some other friends. I'm like, I think I want to do a holiday single, which, Chris like, yeah, we could do that. What do you want to do? Before I could say anything, this other guy said, do Last Christmas. I'm like, why don't we do Last Christmas?
Done. Yeah.
So we did it. But part of it too is I've got a really good friend whom I've known since I was in middle school, and he's a writer. He's a big, pop culture guy, we geek out about, like Doctor Who and comic books and Marvel movies and stuff. But he tends to get really worked up every year because people talk about Last Christmas being a Christmas song. It's not. It's a song about a breakup that happened to take place at Christmas. It's Die Hard and a Christmas movie. It's not a Christmas movie. It takes place at Christmas. There's a Christmas party in it. Other than that, there's nothing about Die Hard that's Christmas. So as much fun as it was to do Last Christmas, just because it's a great song, it was also fun to kind of backdoor it and, as an afterthought, do it as as poking my friend with a stick. Because I did the song and then I recut Die Hard into a lyric video, which is very challenging. Taking a movie, I think Die Hard is 2 hours 4 minutes, maybe 2 hours 10 minutes, and cutting it down to just under 4 minutes,
right?
And keeping the basic narrative structure intact, but still have it work with the beats of the song. So that was fun, and it I think it wound up my friend a little bit. But I did that, and then right on the heels of that, Brian called, Brian Gray, and the Blamed was doing a new record, and they were going to offer bonus tracks to backers. And so I did a new version of one of their older songs. So, I mean, that was awesome to have things kind of come full circle after Brian being instrumental in pushing me toward, the path that I wound up on. And being able to work with him again, but also to be able to be on something that had, the mighty Jim Chaffin, playing on. I mean, Jim is probably one of my top 10, favorite drummers. Jim's awesome, so I've not been idle, but we're getting ready to probably start up the machine again and start recording. At this point, it won't be as pop as the Pop Disaster. When I did the first record, it didn't make sense to me to just repeat myself and do what I'd been doing for the previous, however many years. It was like, well, if I'm going to do something solo, I should do something different. And I've got these songs and they have this feel and I like this sound. So let's make, what for me is a pop record. I know it's still a rock record, but it's not a metal record. It's not a hard rock record. The next one is shaping up. It'll probably be not heavy. It won't be metal by any means, but it'll be probably more of a commercial hard rock kind of record.
I'll say not new wave. New wave needs to make a comeback.
Don't tempt me. I love me some Depeche Mode. I love Duran Duran. Maybe that'll be album number 3.
That's all I've been listening to lately has been new wave stuff. Just because dude, you can only take so many blast beats a month. It gets to you after a while.
Well, I love metal. I'm a metal fan, but like you said, I mean, at some point it does start getting really, really samey. And it's not that there's no melody or anything, but I just like the melody to be maybe a little bit more gentle and a little bit more obvious.
Right.
So bring it on. Bring on Taylor Swift. Bring on, I don't know. Bring on Paramore. Old Paramore, not the new Paramore.
Yeah, I was gonna say. No, that's awesome.
After what was that record? After their third record, they're dead to me.
Oh wow. Strong feelings. That's gonna be the quote for the episode.
Paramore is dead to me.
Luke Easter says Paramore is dead to me. Yeah.
Paramore says who?
Yeah, you got to come up with a real clickbaity title for the for the podcast. But no, we don't do any of that crap. It's like discuss metal episode, whatever. Just go from there. But very cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking your time out. I know I took up like an hour and a half of your time tonight, and you were very gracious with it. And you answered a lot of questions that I had always had kind of as a Tourniquet fan, and I'm happy to see that you're branched out on your own because, like, what it's like for a fan of a band when a vocalist, is no longer in the band. You can continue on with that band, like that's fine, but I always get these questions in my head, like, am I ever going to hear this person sing new stuff ever again? Or am I ever going to, and in a lot of cases you don't, that's just it. And, so it's refreshing to see that in 2020, I could still hear Luke Easter sing, even if it's not to metal, like whatever, but because
I did a vocal on a song for Gary Lanier last year as well. Like he just dropped the new record and we've been talking, we're probably going to do more stuff. So, hopefully I can find some nice balance between, doing metal on the side with, other people's projects and just continue down my path, doing more of the pop rock thing, it's worked for, you look at somebody like Butch Walker, started out in hair bands and went on to, he did seasons with Seven Dust, and now look at him, Katy Perry and Taylor Swift and Fall Out Boy and Green Day. I don't, not saying that I would ever, be necessarily, be capable of that kind of achievement, but it's a nice career to emulate. It's a nice pattern for how to do business. Just follow the music. Just be there with people you like and do projects that interest you as they come up. That's kind of what I want to do. I love making music. I'll do it as long as I'm able and as long as people are willing to listen. That's part of why I appreciate, invitations like yours to be on your podcast. It trips me out that, what is it, 25 years or whatever out from Pathogenic Tour, that people still have any interest in me or what I have to say or what I'm doing. And I'll never take it for granted. I'll never stop being thankful for it. So thank you. Yeah,
no, I definitely appreciate it. And no. All right, Joe, I think we're going to end the podcast there. That's just for editing. But I'm just going to do like my thank yous and all that again. And then, Joe, you could just cut it after he says thank you. And then that's perfect. That's a better place to end it than anything I'm going to say. So he's going to send it back and be like, dude, yeah, Luke was awesome. What was up with you tonight?